shaking off liberal propaganda like an enemy of the Clintons.
Epstein didn't kill himself.
Patriotically Correct Radio with Stu and Rich.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Mojo 50 Radio.
Welcome into this Monday edition of the Patriotically Correct Radio Show. What's going on? My name is Stu Peters. That guy right over there, that is Richard Leonard. Monday, it's always difficult to get into a show on a Monday, and I'm not saying that because I haven't had like 6 or 7 pots of coffee already throughout the afternoon, but what's difficult, I think, on a Monday, good afternoon, Rich, by the way.
Good afternoon.
Is just, I think, getting so much information overload all weekend long. And, you know, watching different, first of all, we want to pay our respects to Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. May she rest in peace. She had a wonderful career, and she stood for something. She was a trailblazer, a trendsetter, a pioneer of all things women and justice for women. So she definitely made her mark, Richard, on the world of politics, and she had no problems bringing politics to the bench and ruling in that way. So whether you agreed with her or not, politically is irrelevant. It's not irrelevant, but you can't argue the fact that she had a standout career.
Yeah, she certainly had. She had balls, and she wasn't afraid to stand up in front of everybody and do what she believed was right.
When Trump first learned of her passing, he was giving a speech, I believe, here in Minnesota. And when he was done there, he went over to answer some questions, I believe, from the press corps. It could have also been from just regular Joe Schmoes. But when he got over there, somebody said, did you hear about the passing of, and it was the first time, and he said, you're just telling me this now for the first time. And he kind of echoed or I was echoing just a couple of minutes ago, what he said was that whether you agreed or not, she lived a fantastic life. And then he turned around and he hightailed it out of there. He said he was very saddened by that news. And just a very classy guy is Donald Trump. I think I heard this morning on Fox and Friends that he's going to wait until after the services before he announces who his pick is going to be. He did confirm that it's going to be a woman, a female, and he said that his list is down to 5 names now. So my pick is Judge Jeanine Pirro, but I don't believe that she's on that list of 5 from the last that I saw.
That's unfortunate. She's great.
You like her a lot, yes.
I love Judge Jeanine.
You've always been a big Judge Jeanine fan. Speaking of somebody else who's got some courage and who's doing everything that he can to uncover something, we have on the phone with us. We had him on last week, and we were not able to get completely into this conversation because he had to go. We were running late, and that was our fault. We have him on the phone again here. Phil Klein, former Kansas State Attorney General. And if you want information more after this, we're going to give you websites and everywhere that we can go to look at this. But Mr. Klein is investigating. Many things, but one of these things is Act Blue. And we talked about Act Blue before. The reason why we got into Act Blue is because of Black Lives Matter. And we tracked down where money goes when you donate to Black Lives Matter. But it runs deeper than that. So Black Lives Matter donates their money through this Act Blue fundraising giant. And I was looking into where the money goes, and we came across got-freedom.com, and Phil Klein has that website. Good afternoon, Mr. Klein. How are you?
I'm real well. Great to be with you again.
It's really hard to to try to paint this picture because it's so complex. Can you dumb it down for us just a little bit and just kind of, if nobody's ever heard of Act Blue before, how would you describe it for our listeners?
Well, just think of it this way. You use MasterCard. MasterCard has a service that they provide in which they actually provide for payment, and they take a cut from the vendors or the people who accept MasterCard as their fees. Mm-hmm. Act Blue is the fundraising giant of the left. So your leftist organizations, whether they be charities or whether they be campaigns, use ActBlue. When you give a donation, you will go through the ActBlue portal. They will carve out 3.9% of those funds, and then they take a lot of that money, and they're a super PAC as well, what's called a 527, and they will give that money to leftist causes. So since 2004 or so, when they were founded, they have moved over $6 billion to the left. Wow. And we're concerned that they do it in a way which will allow third parties to launder money through their system because they don't have verification of identification on the front end. You know those little gift credit cards you can purchase as you're checking out of Walmart?
Yep.
Or wherever. You could call and you could pick out an identity of somebody in the phone book, and then you could use that card to fund contributions to whomever you want on ActBlue, and they don't have a verification system on the front end to make sure that the identity you were using is the actual identity of the person who purchased that card. So what that allows, for example, we've heard all this discussion about Russia.
Yeah.
Well, Russia's not the only country. I mean, you got China, you got North Korea, you've got Iran. All those nations are concerned about American elections as well. And somebody that's a foreign national could easily move money through their system, and there's no verification of identity. That is a huge and significant problem. Congress tried to fix it in 2014, but Democrats helped defeat the bill. And the Republican WinRed, I heard, some people will speak about WinRed. They have a verification system.
Right.
When you buy something online, you have to verify your identity, most likely through a code on the card or a special password. And the WinRed does that. ActBlue does not and refuses to. And that's
Phil,
why you see some strange things.
Is there a way so ActBlue will not identify who their people are. Is there a limit or a cap on how much you can give in one actual donation, or are people able to, let's just say, donate $10,000 without even having to identify who they are or where the money's coming from?
Well, and that's the problem. Yes, you can do that. First of all, the answer to your first question is yes, there are campaign finance limits. And additionally, there are campaign finance prohibitions. Foreign nationals can't contribute to a United States election. But what you can do is you can go online and you can mass purchase those credit cards, those gift credit cards. And you don't even have to have possession. What you do is you get assigned all these numbers. And then you can take a computer algorithm and you could identify identities, and you could spread that out into $1, $2 donations across the country and end up moving way past the limit, hundreds of thousands of dollars past the limit to a specifically designed campaign.
Are you saying that's what's happening? Is that what's going on?
Say that again.
Are you saying that is what's happening? Is this what's happening? Do you have evidence of that?
I'm saying that we clearly know it can happen easily. And we're also finding some anomalies within ActBlue that makes you wonder, where people are giving thousands of contributions in a limited period of time. So examples as people making up to 30 contributions a day for over a year.
That just doesn't seem like normal human activity. I mean,
it doesn't. It does not.
Richard, would you give 30 times a day?
Well, no. Even if I had a ton of money, I'd probably give one lump sum, and depending on what it is I'm allowed to give, maybe twice in a year or something. But no, I'm not giving 30 times a day.
Some of these numbers have changed, but ActBlue has donated in 2020 for Biden. Biden for president, $119,253,857. The number one contribution for political causes, anyway, Bernie 2020, they gave $186 million is what ActBlue funneled into that campaign. Elizabeth Warren Presidential Exploratory Committee, $93 million. Pete for America, that was Pete Buttigieg, $78 million. Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, $55 million. Amy for America, $43 million. Friends of Andrew Yang, $31 million. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The number 10 and lowest, Amy McGrath for Senate, $30 million. This is, you said $6 billion since 2014. Is that correct, Mr. Klein?
2004.
Since 2004. $6
Yes.
billion.
And what we spoke about last week is of their donations in the last year, 9.7 million donations that we looked at. 4.7 million of those donations, 48% of them came from persons who were unemployed.
That's unbelievable. You articulated this to me in an email, and I'm just going to read this because I think that this is actually very interesting. Accordingly, when Emma adopts a cat and pays a $100 fee, her payment is processed by ActBlue, which then gathers and monetizes Emma's information while taking a cut of the payment. Emma is on all kinds of lists now, and ActBlue makes it very easy for Emma to suddenly have agreed to weekly or monthly and sometimes daily multiple debits on her account to various causes. The various organizations are listed in ActBlue's directory. Don't take my word for it. Anybody can find this. Take us through that. I'm Emma. I go to adopt a cat. How exactly does this happen, Mr. Klein?
Well, ActBlue is the payment portal for 501c on the left as well. So your local animal shelter is likely a nonprofit, and many of them have affiliated with ActBlue. So your payment actually flows through the ActBlue portal. ActBlue takes a cut of that. They use those monies any way that they want. And also, you are now on the leftist list that all of these lists are being monetized and shared, not necessarily by ActBlue. It could be done by the local animal shelter. So you end up contributing to causes that you had no idea that you were supporting by participating with somebody who's affiliated with ActBlue.
Richard had a good question. Does Emma know that this is going on, or is this just being done on her behalf? Are these very small, minuscule amounts that she can't detect? Does it only go on until she discovers it and complains about it, or are these big donations that are bankrupting Emma?
Well, we're seeing a mix. For example, I'm in contact with a couple now that their credit card was hit over 270 times over a period of about 45 days for over $4,000. And they say that they never authorized that. So we're trying to get to the bottom of that. But, you know, in the big picture, we're concerned about a couple of things. First of all, to claim that this is disclosure and transparent is false. The donations that flow through there are virtually untraceable. And to claim that the donor always knows who they're contributing to is also false. There's very aggressive tactics, and people can easily become confused. But the biggest concern that I have in looking at what they're doing is how they leave the door open for foreign nationals and other interests to move millions of dollars undetected into the American political system. And it would be very easy for them to change course and change their policy and get verification on the front end, but they refuse. That is a national concern, I believe.
Well, and the other thing too is, so after our conversation last week, I went on and I looked at the differences between between ActBlue and WinRed, and what I noticed was that ActBlue said that, you know, a certain amount or a certain percentage of your donation is going to go, or actually not a certain percentage, my fault. They spread it out evenly amongst their organizations, right? So if I give $50, my $50 is evenly spread out amongst whatever organizations they support. Where now, if you go to WinRed and I click on my state of Minnesota, it shows Donald Trump, and then it shows our congressional and our Senate folks that are running on the Republican side, and all the way even down to the state representatives and the RNC and, you know, the different whatever it is, the conventions or groups. And so you can either specifically give to, you know, Donald Trump's campaign or some state rep who's running, or you can just donate to the party in general. And so even that difference is a whole lot more transparent, because now I can pick where my money's going to, and it's not going to some animal shelter or some food bank. I'm intending to give to a political candidate, and it seems like to me that there is no, hocus pocus act going on.
There's no deception.
Right.
Well, you've identified one of the issues as it relates to political campaign donations that is relevant to Federal Election Commission rules and laws. If the donor doesn't direct specifically where the money goes, and there's a joint campaign fundraising effort, that means you have to reveal how the monies are split and so forth to the donor before the contribution. And Act Blue got an advisory letter in 2014, I think it was, that they are not doing these joint fundraising efforts, so they don't have to comply with that because the donor directs specifically where the money goes. And I think what you're saying and what we have seen raises issue about whether that is actually the case and ought to be examined. So you make a good point. The donors that we've come in contact with thus far say, I had no idea I was giving money to this group. I don't even know what that group is. So now Act Blue has what they call Split It. And they also, we believe, if donations aren't collected within a certain time, those donations default into Act Blue system for redistribution. So there's just a lot that has to be looked at.
The couple that you were talking about, Mr. Klein, how much money did you say that they had given this couple that you were talking about?
Well, the couple that I was speaking about was over $4,000 in a period of less than 2 months.
Without their authorization?
Well, they say they had no idea.
Okay, I just want to be clear on that.
Yeah.
The gift card transactions are not verified. So in other words, there's no proof that the gift card holder is actually the identity of the person in the transaction. So that's one way.
You got it.
And then the other way is I don't even know, because maybe it was something completely apolitical that I gave to or that I made a purchase from. But now, because I've actually authorized this, just by making that purchase or adopting that animal or giving to that cause, now all of a sudden I'm supporting Joe Biden for president. I could be.
Well, that you could be through Act Blue's cut. Now, businesses do that all the time, but Act Blue makes a percentage on what you pay there. And they can use those funds how they deem fit. They've got a super PAC, what's called a 527 PAC, where they move lots of monies to candidates. But the other part of this is you can make a political donation and end up donating into campaigns that you never anticipated.
Right. Who's paying you to do this? I mean, who's paying you to look into this? And what is your motivation?
I am part of the Thomas More Society out of Chicago, Illinois. We're a 501c3 public interest law firm, and we represent and vindicate First Amendment rights, and we have an interest in election integrity. So we've got litigation going on around the nation challenging these self-proclaimed kings and queens of our states who have declared themselves to be the law rather than part of the lawmaking process and are suspending First Amendment rights. We've got lawsuits moving forward and tackling what Mr. Zuckerberg is doing with the Center for Tech and Civic Life in pouring monies into Hillary Clinton districts in 2016 to use government. They're actually giving money to government to turn out the vote, the Hillary Clinton vote for Biden. And government shouldn't play favorites in elections. So there's a lot of battles that we've got going on. And you can find out more at got-freedom.org or got-freedom.org that reports on that. So we've got an election integrity and First Amendment, vindicating our First Amendment rights effort that's going on nationally.
So you mentioned Zuckerberg and him pouring money into these places to influence the election, and that's kind of interest to me because I unfortunately have a pretty personal connection to Facebook as a whole. I have some family that works for them, but how is I mean, so we talked about how there are limits, right, to what you can donate, and there's campaign finance limits. How is this dude able to pour in hundreds of millions of dollars and in very targeted ways to influence the election? I mean, like you said, 82% of Hillary Clinton's vote is being targeted. If I understood right, 82% of the voters that voted for Clinton in these areas are being targeted to come out and vote for Biden.
Well, that's close to it. What they're doing is he gave the money to a 501c called the Center for Tech and Civic Life. They in turn are giving the money to government, and they have picked out jurisdictions thus far to receive these funds, which delivered 82% of their vote to Hillary Clinton in 2016. So you can see what they're targeting. And at the same time, they're pouring these monies in, and you have to understand how much money this is. For example, if with Mr. Zuckerberg's money, they targeted the 10 swing states in the presidential election, for example, and 1/5 of the voters in those 10 swing states, and gave the money to the precincts of those key Democrat precincts, they would be giving $100 for every $1 government provides to run the election. So you would have Zuckerberg precincts with all the money they need to have election workers for the government go out and collect absentee ballots, where in other areas, these blue state governors are shutting down in-person polling places. They're closing them down, making it more difficult to vote, and they would only have $1 for every $100 these groups have. And on top of that, it's important to keep this in mind. We've seen this before, and it was the Democratic Party of the Deep South that made it real hard, if not impossible, for blacks to vote, and real easy for whites to vote. And now all they've done is the same strategy, but they're making it real easy for Democrats to vote, real hard for Republicans to vote. If you look at polling on this data, what you will see is that most Republicans plan to vote close to Election Day in person. Most Democrats plan to vote by mail. So they're expanding this mail and these, I call them Zucker boxes, these drop-off boxes, which are of questionable legality in some states, where you're just going to put in your own ballot into a drop box, and then they're shutting down in-person polling, claiming COVID is the risk. That is suppression of the vote, and that is targeting a demographic to enhance the vote.
Isn't that a violation of state election laws? That's got to be a violation of law, Mr. Klein.
Yeah, it's a violation of the fundamental of fair elections, which they claim that they are supporting. And right there in Minneapolis, it's been announced that they've got, I want to say, $2 million of this money to enhance the voter turnout in Minneapolis.
Disgusting and scary.
I think they should just postpone the election and just call it all off until the COVID's over, right? And let's see how long the pandemic actually lasts.
Yeah, let's see you get that one through, Richard. Let's see the president come out and say, yeah, we're going to just do away with this whole election thing. It's a real pain in the ass.
Hey, how many times have we had a presidential election during a global flesh-eating virus pandemic?
Well, none of that really matters because as you can see that from one side of the aisle, what you say one time does not have any bearing on what you do the next time. For example, Chuck Schumer, who said that, you got to do something. You got to appoint a Supreme Court justice here. Get off your ass and go to work. But now that it's Trump's time to appoint somebody to replace RBG, we can't do that because it's got to be up to the new president. It's just this is also very scary, Mr. Klein. How much of this stuff is going on that the average person doesn't even know about. We appreciate you coming on, former Kansas State Attorney General Phil Klein. If you want more information on this corruption that Mr. Klein and his group are working extremely hard to expose, www.got-freedom.com. That's got-freedom.com. Coming up in the second half of the show, we are going to be talking with Denny Anderson. Denny Anderson he spent many, many years teaching people how to be warriors, cops how to be warriors. We're going to talk about why that has gone away and what that means for cops. More PC Radio straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
We will force votes.
We will not stop.
Any Republican senator is part of the cover-up.
What the f?
Impeachment.
This is madness.
The PC Radio Show with Stu and Rich. Back in a minute.
Hey, it's Stu Peters for Johnson Jewelers, located in Woodbury, Minnesota, but more importantly, located online worldwide at johnsonjewelers.com. Why is that important to you? Well, because if you have been left behind or you have discovered a family heirloom or something that's important to you, maybe it's grandma's birthstone, or maybe it's a pendant or a family crest, maybe it's grandpa's ring, but it doesn't quite fit you, or maybe it needs to be restored, or you see something completely different in mind. Why shove that thing in a safety deposit box? Why put it aside or put it in a shadow box or just break it out every once in a while to show the grandkids? Instead, you could wear that with a custom piece of jewelry designed for you, specifically by johnsonjewelers.com. A quick visit to the website, a couple of emails exchanged, and maybe a few phone calls, and you will have that custom piece of jewelry that means something for you. Visit them online, worldwide, johnsonjewelers.com, johnsonjewelers.com, that's johnsonjewelers.com.
The enemy of progressive politicians and politically correct assholes. PC Radio. Worldwide at thepcradioshow.com.
Monday afternoon, boy, during the break there, Richard and I were talking, and it looks like members of the squad now, which would be with a terrorist Ilhan Omar from here, and then we've got Rashida Tlaib and what was her name? Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Boy, is she a crazy one, man. I mean, look at her eyes. Can't wait for her porn career to take off, though. I just got to be honest with you. I mean, when the political thing just completely crashes and burns like the Lolita Express and she goes into that nosedive, she's going to have a plan B. Richard predicts it's going to be Pornhub. Hey, I'm all right with that. Listen. They've renewed their vows to remove Donald Trump from office. This is all very scary stuff. We just talked to former state attorney general Phil Klein on the corruption that's happening with Act Blue, and we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars, Richard. I mean, just in the ones that I named, there was upward $400 or $500 million funneled through this Act Blue directly into political campaigns, progressive, radical, liberal Democrats, and this is happening right before your eyes without any shame whatsoever. And I just the amount of corruption, it's absolutely doggone scary, Richard, what's happening in our political climate.
It certainly is alarming, and I think that there's probably, we could probably, as I said, we could probably talk to him for 3 or 4 hours about what's going on and where this money is going. And, the next time we have him on, I really am interested to ask him about what is the end state of him and his organization's research. Mm-hmm. What are we going to do? What's the goal with doing all this, except for just exposing it? It needs to be stopped somehow.
Well, obviously, his law firm is filing suits against some of these states, and from these are direct violations of state campaign laws, right, and election laws. You can't suppress a vote. I mean, that's what this is. This is voter intimidation is what a lot of this stuff is on the streets with these Black Lives Matter terrorists as well. This is voter intimidation. So our next guest, I want to get into this a little bit here. I always ask people to kind of give me a little bit of their backstory. And so I received an email from Denny Anderson, who he and his ex-wife moved from St. Paul in 1975 to head film production at Motorola Teleprograms in Schaumburg, Illinois. Over the next 3 years, he supervised the production of 105 police-related films created by various producers nationally. He directed slide and cassette programs for the U.S. Department of State on bomb search procedures, the Nuclear Commission, I think that's Regulation Commission, on the covert transport of special nuclear materials. He also served as a technical advisor on a deadly force decision-making episode of 60 Minutes, and broke new ground by going into prison to interview cop killers. This is one of the most interesting guys I think I've ever had the opportunity to interview. Denny Anderson, welcome to PC Radio.
Well, thank you very much, Stu. I'm honored to be a part of your program.
Well, we're honored to have you. Let's see here. It looks like 160,000 municipal, county, state, federal, and special law enforcement officers have been trained at the hands of you and your work. Tell us more about that.
Well, the company is a very interesting opportunity, and the ability to contact and interact with that many officers came about as a result of 700 three-day officer survival programs that we conducted all over the country in all 50 states and a couple of foreign countries. And, it revolutionized the way in which officers were trained, because prior to getting involved in all of this, the amount of training that dealt with officer survival was extremely modest. Officers were being shot. Nobody knew what to do about it. And it all kind of got swept under the rug. So when Caliber Press was formed as a result of a movie I made called Survival Shooting Techniques, things changed.
Yeah.
And they changed very much for the better.
In short, is it safe to call this warrior training? Is that what this is?
Well, I'm curious what Minneapolis coined as warrior training. Can you summarize that for me, Stu?
Well, it's a mental way of thinking. It's preparedness. It's a way that you approach the job every day. And no, I haven't been through warrior training, Denny, so I really can't opine on that intelligently. I just know this, that it's a way of preparing yourself mentally. It's a state of mind, the warrior state of mind. Okay, and this is the way that cops were trained in many cities, but in Minneapolis, under the former Do Nothing chief, Janae Harteau, she got rid of that program because basically because she's a panderer, and she thought that she could help her city by pandering to criminal thugs, basically, and demilitarizing, if you will, or deprogramming police. And instead of being warriors, they're supposed to be de-escalators, which we all know it doesn't work. And so, as a result of getting rid of training like this, she basically what she was saying is she would rather bury dead cops than criminal thugs. So, and she would rather memorialize criminal thugs and bury dead cops. So it's putting a lot of people at risk. What Bob Kroll did, who's the president of the Minneapolis Police Federation, I'm sure that you're very aware of Bob.
Him.
Yep.
Good guy.
Yeah, what he did is he said, well, then screw it. We can't make you go to this, and you can't get paid while you're on the clock to go to this, but we're going to make this thing available to you, and if you want to come outside of your official capacity as a Minneapolis police officer, we're going to be offering this warrior training still. But it sounds like something that's very similar to that in nature, because you put on how many, 700 of these classes?
700. Well, the basic thrust of what we did in our seminars was share tactics. Options that work, and then the officer selects among those options which are best to use in the field. The basic concept is to have an understanding of exactly what they could do. Today, that's all completely screwed up and destroyed with demonizing police that is so phenomenally disgusting. So, the kind of municipal personnel you're talking about haven't got a prayer in the world of adopting such concepts when they're out there trying to undermine everything. Yeah, I don't think the chief, I don't think the mayor, certainly your governor, has no idea what the hell is going on in terms of the need for effective training. This is a subject that I get really excited about because, you wonder, oh, wow, why do mistakes get made? Why do mistakes get made? Well, let's go back 20, 30 years. First of all, the hiring practices for who gets to take the civil service exam and become a peace officer in the state of Minnesota is completely haywire. And there have been numerous instances like the Somali officer who unfortunately took the life of that
Justine
lady,
Damon, yeah.
Where everything, okay, well, let's pick this guy because it's trendy, and let's pick this person because of this reason. How about the fact that they're qualified or not qualified to be out there being a peace officer? functioning in a job and potentially leading to the use of deadly force. Mm-hmm. And, when I started, I sat in recruit classes and I cringed because everybody was trying to teach defensive tactics, but nobody took into consideration an uncooperative and dangerous bad guy. Everybody was in the gym role playing, everybody's a good guy and they're just sort of like on a par. Well, out on the street, if you're a 5'3" female officer and you're up against some guy who's 6'4" and in an altered state because of narcotics, you do not have a level playing field. You cannot talk to that person infinitely without them completely tuning that out. And what are you going to do next? So what happened was all the politically correct curricula took away from street survival, officer survival tactics that would be instrumental in the proper use of force, the proper use of deadly force, the concept that the public doesn't need to get hurt needlessly, nor do officers. But the focus would really become, what can this officer do reliably to save his life out on the street, given the kind of bad guy that exists? And this is another area, Denny, too, that just...
Denny, that plays into what we've talked about in the past on this show with people like Joe the Cop, who you don't know, but this idea that de-escalation is not always going to work, and like you said, dealing with a completely cooperative guy who had a glass of wine on his way home from dinner is a whole lot different than dealing with a person who is 6'4", 360 pounds, who just is not going to go to jail and is not going to do what you say. And so I think that you are absolutely correct. And we did these things in the military too, where we trained with hand-to-hand combat tactics and all these other things. And the scenarios were always to go exactly how the instructor has directed them. And nobody ever trained on the unforeseen circumstances.
Absolutely. And, it's convenient to dismiss that because you've got only X amount of time. But the fact is, and the liberals are going to have to accept this sooner or later, is that the bad guys are getting more and more and more dangerous than ever before. When we started this out, I would go to medical examiners' offices and talk to medical examiners about gunshot wounds, et cetera, et cetera. And they would tell me every day, we have bodies that come in here, we x-ray them, and guess what we see? We see bullets inside these people from prior shootings. Not the one that killed them this time, but they were shot and never went to a doctor or a hospital to get medical aid. Now, that's a pretty tough individual. And yet the training hasn't kept pace with that. I mean, what do we have in law enforcement? It was a big deal to go to the 9mm pistol. That should have never even been a controversy in the old days.
Right.
And now we've got, don't really do police work. The average officer today has no idea what to do. And that is so dangerous, not only to their safety, but also to the safety of the community. What's happened in Minneapolis is a total, utter disgrace. And you've got to make up your mind. Do you back up the good guys or do you back up the bad guys? Because there is no middle road.
Well, if you're a cop in Minneapolis today, or if you're a cop in Detroit or Philly or Baltimore or Chicago or Houston or LA, if you're a cop in one of these cities, I'll speak about Minneapolis because it's near and dear to me, and you're not considering a lateral transfer, or if you're not considering a career change, you're nuts. You're absolutely nuts. If you want to continue to do that job, if you're not considering a way out, you're nuts. If you want to be a cop, if you really want to be a cop, first of all, I don't know why. It used to be a very good calling. It used to be a very noble cause that you used to. It would fulfill your calling to serve. And but now this is a terrible career choice because your administration will not back you. They will throw you under the bus. They will throw you to the wolves. You'll be subject to criminal prosecution, jail time, even in the most justifiable use of force situation. So walk away from it. Run away from it if you can. But if you feel the need to still be a cop and you really then go to some place like Lee County, Florida. Boy, would we like to interview that guy down there. You know, how about a place where a sheriff has your back? You know, this is the guy. There was a guy down in Texas too. I don't remember what his name is or what county he was from, but there was an officer involved shooting. At which point the officer shot a suspect 15 times. And the very first question, and he killed him, obviously, the very first question of the sheriff was, my God, Sheriff, Jesus, 15 rounds, why so many? And the sheriff said, because 14 wasn't enough and 16 might have been too many. That's why. Next question. Now, that is a guy who has his cops back. You won't see that happening in these liberal Democrat-run cities. By the way, no coincidence, it's all of them, Denny, that are currently on fire. And police officers are in a mass exodus. They're leaving, and I don't blame them. And you know what? The ones that are staying aren't doing anything. They're not doing a thing. They're not doing proactive policing. They're not jumping out on suspicion. They're not jumping out on gangbangers with guns, because why in the hell would they? Why should they?
You know, we have a society that is based on consequences of behavior. You remove the consequences, it's totally open season and party time. And what the press and these liberal politicians don't understand is that the men and women of law enforcement do not go to work every day to get hurt.
Right.
They're there to protect and to serve. And why shouldn't they protect themselves? Why shouldn't there be prosecutions? I mean, it's like nobody goes to jail anymore.
Nope. Richard and I just brought a guy to jail the other night. What was this? Felony domestic and strangulation. What else was there? It was it was felony burglary also.
Burglary. Yep.
And the guy, Denny, was out of jail before Richard and I were. He was literally he walked out of the jail ahead of us. It's absolutely insane. It's completely deflating. Now for Richard and I, we don't really care. It is what it is. I mean, we're not here to save the world. We're bounty hunters. We're bail enforcement guys, right? We get paid to bring guys to jail. So it's nothing personal for us. It's just business. And but how demoralizing as a cop, you go out. I mean, especially you go through the whole investigative process. You build a case. You get probable cause. You go out. You make a really good arrest on something where there was a victim. You know, a victim crime. And this guy's just walking out of jail before your report is even e-filed. It's just absolutely asinine. It's completely backwards. And what this is it's a complete and total lack of leadership. Not only in command staffs across the country, but in mayor's offices, in sheriff's chairs, in chief's chairs. There is no leadership anymore. Everybody is completely gutless in command staffs. And the end result, Denny, is dead cops. I just saw today, there was another ambush. This is just absolutely insane. It's open season on cops, and anybody who, by the way, wants to deny that there's a war on the police, you're living in a delusional fantasy land. There is an open season on cops.
You know, one thing, Stu, that I find really remarkable, law enforcement has got the National Sheriff's Association, the International Chiefs of Police Association, the National FOP, the National City Managers Association. Where are these people in supporting law enforcement overtly?
Right.
Forget the PC crap. What are you doing to foster the backs of these incredible human beings who are out there trying to figure out what is the job anymore?
They're not. And you know, my father, who was a cop for 24, almost 25 years, used to say, you know, the biggest gang in the city is the ones wearing a badge. The biggest, the people that should be feared the most are the people in the city wearing the badge. And I don't think he meant it to say that, we're going to whoop your ass on a day-to-day basis, but it was more of a, we're here, we're watching, and we're going to find you. So if you're going to terrorize this community and you're going to rob, loot, steal, burn, whatever the hell it is, we're going to find you. And you're not going to do that in our city, because we get to say of who walks the streets, right? Meaning that if you're caught, you're going to jail. And if you get out, you're going to go to jail again. And if you do it again, you're going to go to jail again. You're not going to get away, And so he used to tell folks, just start walking and leave my city and don't come back.
Now, the daily ass whippings could be arranged also. I mean,
yeah,
you can go to jail.
Absolutely.
Don't deviate from the plan, right?
Yes, four options.
Yeah, you can go to the hospital, you can go to jail, you can pack your stuff and get the step in, or I can shoot you right here. And if you never deviate from that plan, there was a healthy respect for law enforcement. Okay, there was a healthy respect and a healthy fear of cops, because you knew you don't screw around in Minneapolis. You don't screw around in St. Paul, because when the cops get a hold of you, it's going to hurt. There's no threat of that anymore. And I think that I'm not saying that I'm a huge fan of beating your kids. I mean, I don't know. Listen, my dad, all he had to do was take the belt off. I think it only came across my ass end one time, and that was about enough for me. But I learned my lesson. And there's no more. There's not lessons being handed out anymore, Denny, I guess is what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah. And everybody's forgotten, especially the news media, that in the word enforcement is the word force.
Yeah, absolutely.
You can't say that without including the word force. Now, that can range from verbal presence all the way up the force continuum, but it is in response to what the subject does, not premeditated behavior by the officer. And, if only a few years ago, departments would have had the balls to couch that in their microphone updates and in their press releases, maybe the public would be a little more understanding of the role. This thing in Minneapolis with the MPD 150, I read that tome. What a phenomenal joke. Because, I mean, my God, almost every contact with the public is a positive experience.
Right.
This has been my experience.
Yep.
I grew up in Minneapolis. I grew up in South Minneapolis. Went to the University of Minnesota. Every single contact I ever had with police, including a 12-hour ride-along that got me involved in this initially. Not a lot of people know that. But these officers were fabulous. They were great psychologists. They knew when to, talk, and they knew how to be straight up. And, it was just so impressive. There was nothing on TV that emulated that. The only thing I had ever been exposed to was the TV show Dragnet with Jack Webb. But to see the real thing, and to see the full spectrum of how these people can act, and then you see what's going on today, it's like, my God, this is pure insanity. They don't understand that to be a cop is a calling. It's not a job. My God, how many people would have the guts to do what a law enforcement officer does for even 30 minutes?
Not many. And I think that if we look back into the history of our society, we talk about the greatest generation, the guys, the men and women who served during World War II to present. Yeah. What are the biggest fundamental changes in our country as it relates to individuals? Back then, you weren't allowed to sit in the house and stare at a screen. You had to go outside and get dirty. And if you did wrong, your parents whooped your ass and there was discipline, and my old man talks about how the elders in the neighborhood used to whoop your ass and then bring you home and your parents would whoop your ass. And so, like, not to just say that everyone needs an ass whooping all the time, but maybe everyone needs an ass whooping all the time. And so as we progressed in our society and now into 2020, there's complete lawlessness and there's no respect for authority. There's no integrity. And so what are those changes that have been made over all these years? And I think that we've gotten a whole lot softer on crime. Parents have gotten a whole lot softer on kids because now the kids can call the cops and have their parents arrested for disciplining them. All those things that have just completely went away in our society, I think personally is one of the reasons why we're in the situation that we're in. And if parents would get back to whooping their kids' asses for doing what's wrong and not having any integrity, all this stuff sure might change. And the cops too. The cops. My dad used to say, man, when we bent that corner, we saw elbows and assholes because nobody wanted to deal with us. And if they wanted to deal with us, they had something to lose.
Sure.
So, and what you were saying, Richard was the vein was starting to pop there, and it's a topic that you can be very passionate about it because we're so directly involved. All three of us here are very directly involved, and Richard has more of St. Paul is very nostalgic for Richard. I mean, his dad worked at that apartment for a long time. We have some very good friends that are St. Paul cops, and then of course for me, Minneapolis. And I'm not saying that I don't like St. Paul cops. I don't know. There's just a feeling of nostalgia with Minneapolis. It's a department that's very near and dear to me, and I have a lot of friends on the MPD. Watching them go through this is just absolutely horrendous, Denny. Watching them go through this with a complete coward as a leader, and then both in the mayor's office and in the chief's chair, it's just complete cowardice. And it's going to end up getting cops killed. It's a damn shame.
And it's not getting any better when it comes to the military either. Sorry to cut you off, Denny, but my last point. It's not getting any better with the military either. I just read over the weekend that infantry school is doing away with any kind of shark attack and disciplinary push-ups, and they can't yell at the soldiers and this and that and the other thing. What the hell are we training soldiers to do? Shake hands and pass out effing pencils?
They don't want to get their feelings hurt.
We at one time were the most dangerous force in the world, and nobody wanted to screw with us. But now we're going to be just tell soldiers, hey, put on all your full battle gear and go on out and pass out Jolly Ranchers to these assholes that are going to blow you up.
Denny, your final thoughts. I'll give you the final word here.
Denny? When I was a kid,
there were three people who had respect from everyone. School teachers, clergy, and law enforcement officers. And look what's happened. I talk to people who pray that it may get worse before it gets better, but it will get better. And the honor that I feel toward these people is what they deserve. I try to influence others wherever I can. And I just so admire law enforcement.
Yeah. They are true heroes. Denny, can we have you on again sometime to talk about more of the things that you've done here? I'd really love to hear about your interviews with these cop killers. I'd love to hear about the stuff that you put together for the CIA and how to survive in captivity as a hostage. I mean, you really do have your hands into a lot of things, but unfortunately, you know how this thing goes. We run out of time. We're up against a hard break, so we'd like to reserve the opportunity to have you back. Is that possible? Can we do that?
Absolutely. Anytime you'd like, Stu.
This is an honor talking to you.
Great.
And we'll do it again here real soon. Denny Anderson, law enforcement trainer and actor. Very interesting things to say and very frustrating stuff to talk about, Richard, because we've been talking about it over and over and over again. And Denny is more of an optimist than I am. He says that it's going to get worse and then get better. I don't see it getting any better. I don't see it getting any better at all. Is there a right way to put the toilet paper on the roll? by the way?
Yes, over, not
It's
under.
supposed to
Do
come
under,
over
you're
the
a
top.
communist.
Yes, it's supposed to come over the top. Richard, your final words for this Monday afternoon.
Well, I know you don't share in the words, Stu, but I agree with Denny. It's going to get a whole lot worse before it gets better, but it has to get better for the sake of our children and all that other shit. So,
Hope so. I hope you're right. I hope better days are to come. I really do. I'm not saying that because I enjoy this. Here's what's up to it. Here's what's down to it. Here's to any way you can get to it. Here's to those that don't do it. May they be dragged to it, tied to it, or forced to it. And here's to us who do it, because we're the ones that's used to it. Remember to fly low and avoid the radar. One day they're going to come to the car, and when they do, save the radio!
Twitter blew up.
More offensive than a presidential tweet.
Russia, China, Japan, Mexico, all countries will respect us far more than they do under past administrations.
PC Radio with Stu and Rich. Mojo 50 Radio.